This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. So much happening. You thought that the NBA season was just up until the finals. You are dead wrong. Man, it only starts to happen when it goes down around after the NBA finals. There's the draft. Then there's all of the ridiculous trades that happen. And then there's the summer league. And then before you know it, you blink your eye and we are right back at it again with NBA tip-off. New faces in different places. That's the theme of our show this week. So let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, 50 grand NBA aficionado. My man, brother from another mother, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. www.shawsports.net is where he lays his hat. Always check him out there. My man, Warren Shaw. You know, word has it, man, my man was celebrating down in the Fort Lauderdale. Say it ain't so, Mr. Shaw.
Yeah, man, I had a little birthday thing going on, and shout out to all those who showed up and showed some love to the kid, man. I really appreciate it. Lots of love.
Should we ask you how old you are? Or no?
Nah, man, no, we're gonna leave that alone. You know, I feel every bit of it. But like I said, it's always a great time, to share some of those special moments with people that follow and listen to us as well, man. So thanks and shout out to all those who showed me some love on my B-Day, man.
Man, I think you also alluded to the fact that the greatest gift you ever received was around your birthday time, Jay-Z blessing you with another album from his historic run as being one of the greatest rappers in the game.
Yeah, Lucky 13, 444 drops out, 2 days after my B-Day. So I can't complain, man. This whole, it's a good look. So definitely going to be the soundtrack for, I think, a lot of the NBA players. You're going to be hearing that. I've already seen LeBron quoting at least 5 or 6 lines from it already.
And all the LeBron imitators out there pumping it up just like him, man. I cannot believe that one dude that they had on the LeBron challenge. I mean, he had him down to a T. I think he even went to the barber shop and got his hair cut up exactly like Bron did just for that challenge, bro. Just awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy. And now we just talking to my girl a little bit earlier. Wade has a challenge now with Gabriel Union, man. So these NBA players, they got to find some time, find a way to, occupy their time out of there other than issuing these challenges out there for the fans out there. But it's wild.
Oh, yeah. And look, with the amount of money that's being tossed around already, since the NBA Finals, I mean, these guys have got nothing but time on their hands. And we'll get all into that, man. So much to happen, so much to discuss in our episode of the Baseline NBA podcast. Once again, we appreciate you and yours tuning in. In this week's show, we're definitely talking about the major trades that have taken place a little over a week and a half ago with regards to Paul George, Chris Paul, Jimmy Butler, Ricky Rubio, how all of these moves are going to play a significant role in the way that we're looking forward to the rest of the offseason. But let not that be said that just those trades in itself has also had an impact on what we're going to look at as far as the NBA goes by the time tip-off happens. There's also the NBA free agency, which just happened not too long ago, and already the transactions have been hitting us in a flurry. So we will definitely break down the most important ones that have already taken place. A couple, as we are recording this show right now, have also hit the websites. Adrian Wojnarowski is in overdrive. Mark Stein and those boys, all of those insiders are putting in that work, trying to get the goods on these deals that are being laid out. So we'll discuss all of the ones that we have available to us. You know how we roll. It's our Fat Tracker edition, free agency tracker. So we definitely got the goods in talking about that. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA or get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. We encourage each and every single one of you guys to tune in to the show on all the platforms available: iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Microsoft TuneIn, Player FM, iHeartRadio, Google Music, and the Roku channel. So be sure to download any of those platforms. Allow us to be your go-to resource discussing the goods that's happening in the association. You know how we do, and you know how we roll. It's time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it down.
Time now for the breakdown. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. And the big topic of conversation, undoubtedly, are the trades that have taken place around the NBA draft time frame and even as we lean into NBA free agency. Some very significant trades, which may have actually had a significant impact on some of the deals that we will be talking about later in our segment of The Drop regarding some of the free agency signings. Now, let it not be said, we've had the big debate about how the Golden State Warriors and the super team has changed the landscape of how these organizations are going to start building their teams. Are they just building to beat the best team that's in their conference? Or are they looking to build and beat the best team overall in the NBA? And clearly the Minnesota Timberwolves have seen the writing on the wall. They see the talent that they have with the big cat. They see the talent that they have with Wiggins. They feel like they just need a couple more pieces, and they believe they have the audacity to run with the big dogs, being the Golden State Warriors in the Western Conference. So the big player trade that took place, and it's not even about the draft for the Minnesota Timberwolves. It was the fact that they were able to acquire Jimmy Butler and the draft rights to Justin Patterson, a number 16 pick, for basically Zach LaVine, Chris Dunn, and the rights to Lauri Markkanen, the 7 pick. The Chicago Bulls wind up getting those guys. Shaw, this trade we talk about instantly already spoke volumes about the mindset about the Minnesota Timberwolves and the mindset about the Chicago Bulls. But what does this trade do instantly for the Minnesota Timberwolves in their pursuit to being a playoff contending team this upcoming season?
Yeah, it puts a lot of pressure on this roster and Coach Tibbs. There's a lot of moves that we're going to discuss in this week's show, and they've made subsequent moves following Jimmy Butler to really kind of solidify what they're trying to do. But this is a team that has playoffs in mind. You're seeing some early polls out there, and thinking that, this could already be a top 5, at least 6 team in the Western Conference, not even just struggling to get an 8 seed. Like, they should be legitimately somewhere in the middle of the pack, fighting potentially maybe even for a home court advantage. And that might be a little bit far-fetched, but with the addition of Jimmy Butler coming in there, bringing his leadership, under the tutelage of Tom Thibodeau, who he knows from his Chicago days, pairing that up with Karl-Anthony Towns. And, people think that Andrew Wiggins lacks that fire. Butler doesn't, you know what I mean? And he's a guy there who's going to bring that leadership to the locker room that they so desperately need, and a guy who's obviously an all-star and all NBA level talent.
Yeah. So you mentioned something earlier, Shaw, with reference to the Minnesota Timberwolves looking at this and people already kind of making that statement that this team is capable of being a top 5 NBA team. How often have we seen us make these leaps when you look at the names on roster, the names on paper, as the cliche, so to speak, goes. But we're also talking about the components that it takes to win games. Now, there's no question Jimmy Butler is a game changer, albeit the one thing that I think worries me about this Minnesota Timberwolves team is the one thing that I thought Tom Thibodeau was coming in to help facilitate to these young guys. For a moment, forget Zach LaVine, because I think Zach LaVine, grew exponentially, prior to that injury. And maybe that's a decent get for the Chicago Bulls. But for the Minnesota Timberwolves, the propensity for them to not be able to play disciplined defense, is it a matter of extracting guys like Ricky Rubio and moving guys like Zach LaVine when your core players themselves are indicative of the style of defensive effort that Tom Thibodeau was able to exhibit from his previous tenure as a Chicago Bull? So what we're asking these Minnesota Timberwolves kids to come out and do on a nightly basis in always the competitive Western Conference.
Well, yeah, I think he's trying to build an image of kind of the Chicago Bulls 2.0, as you're probably seeing that all over your social media feeds. Doing a lot what Doc Rivers did as a Clipper. You know what I mean? Now that he got the rights to be able to call the shots into what personnel was going to be brought to the roster, and he was the coach, he brought guys he was familiar with. Now, I think in the case of Tibbs, he's bringing people that are still obviously very capable. Doc never brought anybody over the caliber of Jimmy Butler to the Clippers. You know what I mean? He didn't have that luxury. So I think Thibodeau is trying to make the team in his image and being a defensive-minded squad. They still lack a little bit of shooting. That's going to be an issue for them, but they're not going to lack toughness, and they're not going to lack size, especially with some of the other moves that they've made, again, that we'll get into a little bit later on. This is a team that has their eyes on their prize and are going to have a defensive mentality and be very, very tough in doing so. So you're not going to want to play this Minnesota Timberwolves team. I think they're going to rough you up, and they're going to be able to score, from the perimeter a little bit, not from 3, but from mid from the jumpers, and Butler and Wiggins slashing on the wings. Karl-Anthony Towns doing it from everywhere that he possibly can. This is a team that's poised to make a huge leap.
Minnesota Timberwolves are the 13th best team in the Western Conference, posting a 31-51 record just this past season. So with that in mind, Shaw, how significant a leap are we talking about with only 31 wins, last season? And I guess the other question that comes into play here is, who takes a step back? And when I use that terminology of taking a step back, I'm saying they're taking a step back in order to facilitate the scoring opportunity that Jimmy Butler is going to wind up commanding at his role, at his position. And I'm not even looking at this from the perspective of It's a matter of him getting money. It's just a matter of knowing that he's worked hard to actually be recognized as an offensive, capable basketball player. In a way, he's molded like Paul George. And it took a while for a guy like Paul George to actually get his, get his respect as far as his ability to score the basketball. You're just getting that from a guy like Andrew Wiggins. You know that it's already ironclad with the big cat. So I'm just wondering who of these guys are really taking a step back in their maturation of ascending themselves from an offensive perspective to yield to what we've been seeing from Jimmy Butler the last few years.
Well, I mean, you would have to think it's going to be Wiggins, who might take a little bit of a step back. But to me, I don't know if Butler, although he's proven to be a very capable scorer, I don't know if he's that concerned about being, a 25 plus point per game guy. I think he could be fine being at 20, 21 a game. And he's shown that he's the guy who can pass the ball and facilitate offense as well and focus defensively. I think Wiggins and Butler are probably going to, cancel each other out to some degree. They'll both maybe take a little bit of a hit. But I think Butler is a guy who has more diversification to his game, more versatility. And with his ability to pass and run, pick and roll and things of that nature that Wiggins can't do, his stats across the board may go up except for his scoring, while Wiggins, he may take a little bit of a hit there. And again, you just never know. Maybe Butler, like, you know what, I don't care. I'll score 15 a game. You guys do what you need to do. He'll worry about, playing defense. Because if there's one thing about Jimmy Butler, I believe he wants to win. I think he wants to win at all costs. The only guy who's not going to suffer in terms of touches is going to be Karl-Anthony Towns. You have to run offense with that guy and continue to give him the ball as much as possible.
All right. So before we move our attention to the Houston Rockets big trade that's taken place, let's finalize things with regards to this Minnesota Timberwolves theme a little bit here. So obviously, with that being said, the Utah Jazz wind up acquiring Ricky Rubio a few days ago, which in turn opens up the reasoning behind the Minnesota Timberwolves' decision to sign a guy like Jeff Teague to a 3-year deal. And this, to me, I guess, is where it just all kind of hits me. As great a move as this was for getting Jimmy Butler, where are we putting this move on them now moving Ricky Rubio along and then signing Jeff Teague to a basketball team that people are now saying should be considered as a top 5 type of team? Are these additional moves after the Jimmy Butler going to facilitate that mindset that we're talking about with the Minnesota Timberwolves?
Well, yeah, I think overall they will. I'm not a Jeff Teague guy. I don't.
Well, again, that's the reason why I'm asking the question, because I find this hard to imagine that if you were having, issues, I don't want to say issues, but if you couldn't move Ricky Rubio going all the way back to the trade deadline when Derrick Rose was the name that was available, if you were trying to make a play for that, and then between Derrick Rose and any other guard that's going to be available at this moment in time, there was even speculation that Kyle Lowry might be available, whatever the case may be. You go with Jeff Teague, and then you give him a 3-year, $57 million deal? To my head, I'm thinking, why don't you just stick with Ricky Rubio?
I mean, Teague's a better shooter. He's a better scorer than Rubio is, so I wouldn't take that away from him. But Rubio's a better defender. So I think Rubio played extremely well the latter part of this past season. He was amazing after the All-Star break, putting up almost triple-double like numbers, on multiple occasions and getting high assists and really finding his groove with that roster. So, but the writing was on the wall. But the fact that they got rid of both Rubio and Dunn, and now are left with Teague and don't really have much of a backup there because they got rid of, was it Jones or Payne or I don't know, whatever, which one of those guys, to me, it's a very interesting situation. I think that they find themselves in with Teague, especially with a guy who we just talked about with Butler, who can play with the ball in his hands and he can facilitate offense himself. So I don't know where Teague is going to fit into this equation. If I were them, I would have been going after the Kyle Lowrys. I would have been going after even a Drew Holiday. Maybe not at the price tag that those guys ended up signing for, and maybe that would have precluded you from getting them anyway. But to me, even a George Hill would fit better than Jeff Teague. But either way, it's still a positive move overall for all the things that they've done. And this is a team that definitely is still going to be on the rise.
I mean, the one good thing is that the Timberwolves do acquire the Thunder's 2018 first round pick, being his top 14 protected. I guess that might be a good thing. To me, this is still a head scratcher to me, because just to your point. Me personally too, I'm not too much of a Jeff Teague fan. I think he's an adequate point guard. I just don't know if he's adequate for the kind of roster that they were able to build making such a bigger trade in getting Jimmy Butler. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Our segment of the breakdown as we talk about the big trades that have taken place already in the 2017 NBA off season. So let's go ahead and focus our attention on the next big trade that took place. And this one was a stunner because I don't know if whether or not we all saw this coming. Maybe you can give kudos to the Los Angeles Clippers because they saw the writing on the wall and probably recognized the fact that they couldn't come to any kind of solidified agreement and being able to keep the poignant point guard and Chris Paul. But the Houston Rockets land Chris Paul for basically Lou Williams, Patrick Beverley, and I think for the most part, the Rockets have facilitated the Los Angeles Clippers, their G League team, for the remainder of the Summer League. It's just absolutely remarkable how this all has taken place. And in a time where we're starting to question and wonder whether or not the Los Angeles Clippers is going to start making that transition after getting Jerry West as a consultant, this type of move says what to you, Shaw?
Well, for the Clippers, you mean? That they didn't have a choice. They were in a situation where Paul wanted to leave. And, we've been clamoring for it for, I guess, a year or two now, right? That this is a team that no matter what,
yeah, we said the party needed to. It's kind of like that State Farm commercial. He's like, oh, man, it could be happening from everywhere. Oh, it's going down. Like they need. Yeah, this team of Jordan, Paul, and Griffin, it needed to get nixed. Like it wasn't going to play. They were not going to win a championship, but with all three of them playing on the same team.
Well, and if it wasn't for Chris Paul, they would have re-upped, according to Doc Rivers, because he put it out there that, hey, this is on Chris. He wanted to leave and not knocking him, but he wanted to go play with James Harden, and so we accommodated him, and I think kudos to Chris as the trend continues to happen where some of these guys are like, hey, you know what, I'm going to leave anyway. Here's what you need to do so you can get some sort of assets for me before I leave you high and dry, if you will. So for the Clippers, it symbolizes that they understood that CP3 didn't want to be there, and they got the best haul they could get considering he had a specific destination in mind, which also brings into the conversation that, hey, all these guys are going to be free agents again next year. Chris Paul, Carmelo, LeBron, Wade, et cetera, the whole banana boat thing. So I think Paul's going to go to Houston, play it out for a year, see what's good. And the Clippers, hey, we'll see what happens because they've got a lot of holes to fill, but not a lot of money in order to do so.
So this is the thing that I think really kind of hits me upside the head, Shaw, and maybe, I apologize if I sound like a foolish kind of guy. If you're Daryl Morey and Mike D'Antoni and you're the Houston Rockets, what are you exactly rolling the dice on with making this move in getting Chris Paul? For a moment, we're going to assume that clearly Chris Paul is an upgrade from Patrick Beverley. We understand that. We know that. This basketball team is still going to be a good basketball team because essentially most of the pieces that the Houston Rockets wound up giving up in this trade are not pieces that is going to damage, the Houston Rockets as far as what they were able to achieve this past season. But it makes you do wonder that by making this kind of play, if Chris Paul does not choose to re-sign with the Houston Rockets, you now essentially have stymied a little bit the progression that you got from James Harden being your point guard, because now you're probably going to ask him to go play the two guard if you're going to have him playing next to Chris Paul. So a year of that gets wasted if this Houston Rockets team doesn't find themselves playing for an NBA championship. And then at the expense of that, you have to go out and have to replenish the basketball team with essentially a very important position, be it either the point or the two. So that to me is where I worry about this, because I can understand if you made this play for a guy playing at the 5, a guy playing at the 3, a guy playing, at a point forward position. But it's the point guard, shooting guard position, two positions that is highly important to the Mike D'Antoni system.
Well, I think what their situation is like they're not done. They want to be able to see if they can land another guy out here to really maybe convince CP3, to stay there past this 1 year. Obviously, they have Harden locked up for a considerable amount of time, and I think that's what their plan is. That piece
being Carmelo Anthony, I suppose.
And that very well could be Carmelo, could be a Paul Millsap. There's Rudy Gay. There's a bunch of guys out there still as we record that haven't signed yet that could fit into the D'Antoni system because, well, anybody offensively can fit into the D'Antoni system. So what I'm looking at, though, from Houston's standpoint is, hey, Harden's played off the ball. Harden apparently was pseudo recruiting Chris Paul in the season, Draymond Green to Kevin Durant style. And is like, listen, I'll go back to playing the two, and I have no problem with it. So I don't think they're going to have a problem making that work per se. And D'Antoni is an offensive genius. I just can't see how those two won't be able to coexist. And if it does fail in terms Chris Paul decides to leave, well, then you'll just see what you saw again this year. Harden going back to the one and potentially leading league in assists again. So either way, Houston, I think, took an acceptable risk. The guys they gave up, it was a lot of players, but none of those guys are game changers. I mean, Pat Beverly, obviously a very good ball player, starter in this league, off defensively, has worked on this game to be able to shoot the three. But Montrezl Harrell, just working into his career, Sam Decker, guys like that. Like, Houston's not going to miss those guys. They're not irreplaceable. So I think it was an acceptable risk getting Chris Paul for the season.
All right, so when we look at this, Shaw, not long-term, but for the 2017-2018 season, what are we talking about with this Houston Rockets team that got 55 wins this past season? Definitely a team that found themselves playing in the semifinal round in the playoffs. I mean, do they lose a step? And I understand where you're coming from, where they're still not done as far as making, significant moves, but even with the addition of Chris Paul, does this absolutely enhance that 55-win total, or can it diminish that 55-win total, even though still we're saying that they're going to wind up being a playoff team with a perennial MVP player like James Harden by his side?
Well, here's the thing. I'm going to look at this much similar to like how when we talked about the Celtics adding Al Horford. I don't know how many more W's it gets them in the regular season. This move is made for the playoffs. So, if it's about 55 wins, between 55 wins and 60 wins, or whatever the case may be, I don't know. And I don't know if that even matters. I think for them, it really is, okay, Harden wore down when it came to the playoffs. He didn't have another person he can lean on offensively. And then we all know what he is defensively. Chris Paul automatically helps them on both sides of the basketball. He's an all NBA defender, one of the best stealers in the game that we've ever had. And a guy who can shoot the three, obviously great passer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, this move is all about their postseason run. It has nothing to do with the regular season. So it's going to be about, do they make it to the conference finals and then, potentially making it to the NBA finals, upsetting the Warriors.
How lethal a combination are we talking about with this Paul Harden combination?
Yeah, I mean, it's scary. I'm sure we'll maybe have some fun before the season begins and talking about, the best backcourts or the best duos and things of that nature. They have to be right up there. Right now, if you would have said that Steph and Clay were the best 1 and 2 combination, I would have to think Chris Paul and Harden are actually a better 1 and 2 combination on their face. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I don't know that you can get any better than that. Lowry and DeRozan, Wall and Beal, all those guys. I don't think there's anything better than right now than James Harden and Chris Paul as a duo in terms of the backcourt.
All right. Well, the Houston Rockets, once again, a team that found themselves, to many people's respects, overachieving with 55 wins this past season. They pull off a blockbuster move, acquiring Chris Paul to play next to the Beard. That combination, as to Shaw, as to what he alluded to before, this could probably be one of the most potently dangerous combinations that we'll see, not just in the Western Conference, but possibly all of the NBA. Definitely a head turner. And as we said before, Daryl Morey, clearly he is not done. He's probably looking to get 1 or 2 more pieces to make sure that he keeps Paul's interest to stay as a Houston Rocket. Will this amass the Houston Rockets ascending themselves in that conversation for the upcoming season as contenders in the Western Conference to possibly go to the NBA Finals? You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Our segment of the breakdown as we break down all of the trades that have taken place already as we embark upon NBA free agency. It's been hot and heavy, and probably the one that has most heaviest and has us all kind of like, what? Taking a double take is the move that was made by the Indiana Pacers in sending Paul George to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis. If there's anybody that I feel for right now, it's probably Victor Oladipo. Here he is getting an award for Dunk of the Year as an Oklahoma City Thunder. There he is walking up the stage, getting pounds and love and hug from the Brody, being acknowledged by the Brody as he hoists up his MVP trophy, saying, "This is for you guys. I wouldn't have done this if it wasn't for you guys." And then the next thing you know, he is getting shipped off to Indiana. And I know we're going to be talking about this combination of Paul George and Russell Westbrook, Shaw, but I want to first get to the Indiana Pacers side of this because I think this could get lost in the whole conversation. First of all, what is Sam Presti thinking? And more importantly, what is the Indiana Pacers thinking with this particular kind of move?
The Pacers were, I don't care what anybody says. There's a lot of stuff out there, and it all comes back to, in a lot of ways, to the Celtics, who obviously had significant interest in Paul George, and people are trolling Danny Ainge and Boston right now. But Celtics needed to do things in a sequential order. And, we had our guy Pete on here a little while ago and talk about Kevin Pritchard, and he's going to do the best thing he can do for his team. And I don't know. I just feel like there was you can't tell me that this deal couldn't have been there later on, even into the summer. Like, you just cannot tell me that, okay, Oladipo and Sabonis, you didn't even get a first round pick out of it. So whereas reports are, and I put that in air quotes, that, okay, you're looking for 2 and 3 or maybe even 4 first rounders from Boston, and then you didn't take any first rounders and Oladipo and Sabonis, that to me is the head scratcher. And I just don't understand the thinking in that right now. And again, we don't have all the information that goes on behind closed doors on those phone calls and those text messages. But it seems to me that Indiana sold themselves a little bit short here. I know there was
I think you're being
hesitancy
too
on most
kind,
teams.
or you're saying just selling themselves a little bit
No,
short.
I mean, but I know there's hesitancy on teams wanting to rent Paul George for a year. I get that. And I would be very, very, skeptical myself. But I just don't feel like that was the haul that did it. There's a lot of jokes out there right now. When you go back to even like the Cousins trade, which trade was worse? Because Sacramento has now turned those picks into some valuable players and some prospects.
I think that's the point, Shaw. Like, I think now it just makes me question more about what exactly is the overall motive. What exactly is the plan for the Indiana Pacers? Now, I'm not saying that you should always rely on it having to be about draft picks. I mean, if you believe that Domantas Sabonis is worthy of to substitute. No, but that's what I'm saying. If the idea is that you're saying that his game, his play is substituting the hassle and, the rigmarole of having to go through a draft and probably trying to find the pieces that you're looking to build towards the future. All right, I get that. But in the climate of what we're dealing with right now in the NBA, and you look at the roster that the Indiana Pacers have been throwing out there for the last couple of seasons with and without Paul George, I find it very hard to believe that this was the best outcome you can get for someone that you were touting as a cornerstone basketball player. Like, he is supposed to be this all superstar, and then you have to sit here and rack your brain about re-signing and talking about throwing out max contract, this, that, and the third. And had he not basically came out and said, I don't want to play for you guys anymore, that you were probably willing to throw all of this out. Then you look at this and say, this is what you're getting in return. It makes me really, really question what's going to happen to this Indiana Pacers team and ultimately some of the talent that's there, because in their mindset, it's like, is it on me? Like, if you're Miles Turner, is it on me? Am I that dude now? Do I shoulder that? Because you can't tell me that Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis are suddenly going to ascend themselves to be the man in Indiana. We don't even know if that's going to be the case.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm concerned about Oladipo. You look at this situation, 2 teams have passed on him now. OKC's happy to get from underneath that contract one way or the other, because I guess he just wasn't the guy that they hoped he could be next to Russ. And I know why they did the deal for Paul George. They're trying to build some equity because both of those guys are going to be free agents going into next year. So they needed to show Russ a little bit of something, especially averaging a triple-double, being named MVP and all of those things. But you're right, though. Indiana, it's a more than a bit of a head-scratcher because you just don't really know what this roster is. They have this plethora of bigs. And Oladipo, I guess, will be the starting 2 guard, but Oladipo and Monta Ellis together, that's a weird fit. They don't have a point guard as we record the show, and obviously that's a situation that they'll address going into the season. But there's a lot of holes with this roster, and you just know the name Paul George should have and could have commanded a lot more than the haul they got back from him.
All right, so let's now go ahead and focus our attention to Oklahoma City Thunder from your, as you just alluded to. What is this actually saying about Sam Presti? Because Shaw, listen, I told you that I wasn't all in favor about this move back when they traded for Oladipo to begin with, okay? And at first I said, let me give Sam Presti the benefit of the doubt because who am I to argue with anyone who's caught in a situation where you have players that you don't believe that you're going to have the money, quote unquote, to be able to get players, and then you find out after the fact that maybe isn't as much as clearly as you thought. The situation with James Harden, and you look at this situation with regards to Kevin Durant. I'm really starting to question Sam Presti now, because it's very hard for me to imagine that if you're talking about trying to sustain something that is going to be successful for whatever the period is post Durant, quote unquote, during Westbrook, this move to me, I just feel is counterproductive. You are really rolling the dice here, because even if, let's say, for example, Russell Westbrook decides to stay, I'm still trying to imagine this combo between him and Paul George, where this symbiotically is going to make them look like what they were able to achieve just this past season as what? I think they came in as a 7 seed or as an 8 seed. They came in as 7 seed. They came in as 6 seed. My apologies. They came in as a 6 seed, right? Look, I'm really struggling with this. I would think that if you're going to make a play for players, you make a play for players that's going to accentuate the hype and the build of the Brody. I don't know if I'm seeing that when I see this combination between him and George.
Yeah, it is a tough fit. I think a lot of people are excited about it because they just feel like Paul George can come in there and basically be Kevin Durant, to a lesser degree, and they can play off each other and be just fine. But like I said earlier, for Presti, this is a show of faith, and a show of goodwill to Russ. Like at the end, I've said 100 times over for both teams that we talked about. Nobody really wanted to see Westbrook and Harden have the same 2 seasons that they had again next year. It would have been extremely difficult to kind of swallow, like, oh, yeah, these guys are putting up these astronomical numbers. Oh, wow. But it doesn't equate to winning. It doesn't equate to much of anything when it comes down to it. And I think both teams now have decided, all right, well, we need to get these guys some help. They can't be out here, on an island out here just running around trying to throw up triple doubles on a regular basis. And that's what Sam Presti did. He wanted to show Russ, hey, man, I see what you did for us. It was a hell of a job. It was hella hard, but we don't want to put you through that, that load again. Let's get you some help to do some of this heavy lifting and see if we can build a championship contender. Because Russ knows that team is not going anywhere. So what were Presti's options? Not do anything, re-sign Taj Gibson and bring back the same roster, keep Oladipo there and hope Oladipo gets to be the player that everyone thought he could be, like a Dwayne Wade 2.0. That's not happening. So he went out there, was aggressive. Yeah, he traded Sabonis. And if you look at it from this standpoint, think about it this way, which was, again, it's not my original thought. I saw it on Twitter, but it makes a lot of sense. They basically turned Serge Ibaka into Paul George. Even if it's a Paul George rental for 1 year, they turned Serge Ibaka into Paul George in 2 years.
Well, the frightening thing here is that, he may actually wind up playing like Serge Ibaka. I mean, that essentially could be what happens. That, we're blowing up him being a 4-time All-Star, him being the man at Indiana, but we clearly saw something about Paul George, that there was a tipping point. Now, I don't know, maybe the Brody might bring out more from Paul George that we just haven't seen in this past season and over the last year or so. But when I think about the mentality and the mindset, and you couple that with the fact that you are playing now in what arguably is going to be one of the toughest divisions in the NBA, the Northwest Division, okay? I'm finding it very hard. Like, look, for Paul George, it ain't a thing because he has already said he wants to go to Los Angeles. And I think for Los Angeles, for the Los Angeles fan base, they don't even care about 2017. They just want, if he wants to come, bring him. He's a hometown. We love him. We know that what he's capable of doing. I'm wondering if Billy Donovan and the Brody is going to be able to manifest something that is going to be symbolic of what you're just talking about. And it's a reach for me to believe that that's going to be the case, which is why I question Sam Presti when he throws these Hail Marys out there. It's the timing of when they happen. Like, I can understand if he had to do it because he has no faith in Victor Oladipo. I get you. No question about that, Shaw. But you know what? You spent a year investing in the idea of building him up to be that way. And there was actually some semblances of the Brody growing on Oladipo. Then you went and you drafted Domantas Sabonis. You clearly didn't have any faith in him, so you went and you got Taj Gibson in a trade. Now you have neither one of those guys. And at the end of the day, you still have to do something with Enes Kanter and Steve Adams, because that to me is part of the reason why you're not getting the max productivity from your starting lineup, because they're players that just do not play conducive to the way that Westbrook plays. So again, I lean to the idea that while this is a Hail Mary and you hope that this works out, this could really backfire for Sam Presti. And it has to, like, we don't always scrutinize these GMs who make these executive decisions. We have to wait after like a 2-3 year period. But these 2 years that Sam Presti has been making moves, I'm telling you, if we don't get on them, if these things do not work out, then there may be something more wrong with us than what us believing that it's Sam Presti is as impressive as we think that he is.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a thought to throw out there because they've taken a step back. But I mean, I don't think people really lay Durant leaving at the feet of Presti. Like, that was a Durant decision. That's how he wanted it to go. You know, for the better part of Presti's career, he's made some decent
Shaw,
moves.
are we really saying that?
Was a mistake. Wait, so you blame Presti for Durant
I'm
leaving?
not necessarily saying that I'm blaming Presti, but I am wondering if what happened to James Harden was not a telling tale about Durant's apprehension to how committed the Oklahoma City Thunder organization management is to getting him to where they felt they were already at that time, getting to the NBA Finals. If what we're talking about is the difference of about $4 million in its ability to keep James Harden, and this was just a matter of fight and tug, and they just did not want to give on this. I mean, do you not think that started a trend a little bit about Kevin Durant's perception about where their commitments are?
I think so. I wouldn't shortchange you on that in any way, shape, or form. But at the same time, the way I look at it is Oklahoma City blew a 3-1 lead. They were up. They should have beat the Golden State Warriors. That was done.
No, you're absolutely right about that. That's not on Presti.
Yeah, so Presti assembled a team, hired a new coach, in Donovan last year, who in theory could have went to the NBA Finals in his first year. And that to me is just like, okay, that's why I'm saying Presti doesn't have a whole lot of blame. He has a lot of equity when it comes to how he's built this roster and these teams. And I know you were not on board, with Oladipo and Sabonis, being traded to them last year and were questionable of the fit. But I think we're in the same situation again this year. And like, well, what else is he going to do? He has to try something. So yeah, he's like, hey, he's like a Mad Hatter right now. He's in the kitchen cooking up some stuff, trying to figure out a way. I think Paul George is a much bigger upgrade than Oladipo and Sabonis are. We'll have to see how it goes this upcoming season.
Sam Presti, aka Raekwon the Chef, trying to cook up some marvelous ish for the NBA. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So, hey, man, incarcerated Scarfaces if this doesn't play out the way it needs to. So we will definitely keep our eye on the Oklahoma City Thunder. We'll most definitely keep our eye on Paul George because this is really going to be a make or break situation for him. He's gambling on the fact that he's going to come out looking pretty nice for a lovely contract after this season, whether it be through the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Los Angeles Lakers. Is clearly he has his sights on that as well, too. So this is going to definitely be an interesting situation as we now add a little bit more element to the storyline and the narrative now that's playing out in Oklahoma City. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cali, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Breakdown. Time now for The Drop. Cali, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. Our segment of The Drop is to get back. No, I'm not talking about us getting obese. I'm talking about free agency tracker, man. It's time for us to lay it down. In the years past when we used to do it, we used to play our little De La Soul, fat, and do all of that stuff. We ain't got time, man, because there's too many deals that have happened by the time that we've been recording this podcast for us to be tracking. So the fat tracker is in effect. Free agency rollout. My man Sean and I, we break down the moves and transitions, and we give to you the goods about why these deals are important and the significance of the dollars being made or being made by the players and how important this is going to be. So we're not going to waste any time, man. Let's first get right into the dollar bill, y'all. Cash rules everything around Steph. Okay? This dude is the first $200 million man in the NBA. 5 years, $201 million, Shaw. Quite honestly, I don't know if they actually added that $1 million for flavor. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, the saltiness to the rest of the NBA. But I cannot fault Steph Curry for getting this money. In the time span that this boy was making his meager little $11 million, he became a 2-time NBA MVP and a 2-time NBA champion. You better pay that man his money.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hey, $40 million man is what he's going to be per year. I think there was another thing out there about how much he's increased the Warriors stock, if you will, from when the owner bought it initially.
Jersey sales still the number one in the NBA. Like, it's ridiculous.
So they, again, he's an all NBA player, all those things, Supermax, one of the first guys to actually get that Supermax. Congrats to him. Kudos to him. He's going to be in Golden State a long time because he has been paying his dues. He had those ankle injuries to begin the season. To begin his career, rather. And they weren't sure. So they shorted him. He got like Ty Lawson type money, when all those guys were getting their deals. And yeah, definitely he was one of the most underpaid players in the NBA for the last couple seasons.
One thing that I want to make mention of, Shaw, that I think is really important, and this is a testament to, I don't know how many people who listen to our podcast actually participate, play, not in the NBA, but in any organized sports, whether it be basketball, baseball, football, whatever the case may be. If you're someone that's listening to this, I want you to understand why this is really important. Steph Curry was the type of player who everybody saw a lot of promise, but they weren't sure about where the potential would be. And those injuries certainly are the very kind of elements that make organizations really question about how much investment they can make. Because in most cases, other organizations probably would have threw money at Steph Curry, and you don't know if he was going to do what he just showed you in the 4-year span of his play. He basically took a small market franchise, put him on his back, and he's elevated this to a team where they're now being looked at as a large market franchise, where you can get a guy like Kevin Durant coming over from OKC to come play for. He's almost broken the mold, so to speak, about the perceptions in how superstar athletes should look at the destinations that they're going to and whether or not they're going to make the kind of money that they think that they make. And the other thing that I want to bring out about Steph Curry real quick is this guy paid his dues, right? Like, he didn't piss and moan about not getting the kind of money he thought other guards were already getting, like the Derrick Roses, the Chris Pauls, those type of guys, right? He didn't even believe or see himself he probably knows within himself that he thought he was going to be on that level. He's going to be at that stratosphere, so to speak. But he put in that work that made it very, very difficult for his organization, the franchise that he plays for, to not give him the money that he deserves. And if there were ever a time that you had to question the Golden State Warriors about what they knew that they needed to do before and after this whole situation of this NBA championship, you make sure that you keep Steph Curry as your pillar for where you are as a franchise and what the Golden State Warriors represents over this 5-year span.
There was just nothing to see here, if you will. All it is like the numbers are eye-popping, but the fact that he's staying, there was never any controversy, never any rumor, never any doubt. I don't think Bob Myers was waking up in the middle of the night like, oh my God, how am I going to know? Like, this was done well before, July 1. So, kudos to Steph, and like you said, sticking it through. And paying his dues, as you will. He didn't, like I said, didn't complain at all when Clay got his money because he knew his time was coming. And Bob Myers and the Golden State Warriors, they definitely made good on their promise.
And kudos to Del Curry, raising his son to understand the game. Most of these kids, they don't understand the game. They don't have the right team around them to understand that this game has components to it. There's the play, and then there's the business. And Steph Curry right now, yeah, he's handling his business. Let's talk about a team that we don't know if they're handling their business or maybe the business is handling them. But Blake Griffin winds up re-signing with the Los Angeles Clippers for 5 years, $173 million. Now, I feel like with this whole Blake Griffin thing, Blake Griffin is sitting outside of the LA Clippers offices, Ballmer and Doc Rivers, sitting there locking the doors, trying to keep Chris Paul from leaving. And then all of a sudden, Chris Paul's like, I'm out, deuces, I'm heading to Houston. And then all of a sudden, Blake Griffin say, yo, is the coast clear? You think we can talk about my money now? It's just so convenient to me. But we said this all I called it, Shaw. I said, I don't think Blake Griffin and Chris Paul really like each other like that, feeling each other like that. And the way that they have been ousted over the last couple of years, to me, was indicative that one of these two dudes had to go. It either had to be Chris Paul and it'd be Blake Griffin. And I was just more surprised it was Chris Paul was the one that had to go, because I felt like he still felt like he can do something with DeAndre Jordan more so than him doing something with Blake Griffin.
Well, I mean, like I said, we said in the beginning of the show, it was Paul's decision to leave. The Clippers would have gladly taken him back, welcomed with open arms, paid him whatever he wanted to get paid to keep him there. But you're right. I think Blake is very excited to be kind of the biggest fish, in the pond there when it comes to Clipperland. And now you're going to see him go on a tear, assuming that he doesn't tear anything and can stay healthy. He'll probably put up some monster numbers this upcoming season, be one of the best passers in the game that he already is, put up some very gaudy assist numbers and things of that nature. The Clippers need to figure out the rest of this roster, but I think with Chris Paul leaving, that opened up the door for him to stay and get the 5-year extension. I don't think he even took the meeting that he was supposed to take with Phoenix. He definitely didn't meet with the Boston Celtics or the Miami Heat or anything of that nature. Chris Paul leaving and that happening as early as it did probably really cleared the way for him to get his max deal or near max deal, to have him stay there for the next 5 years.
Are we talking about Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan resurrecting that mantra about Lob City and more so about them being one of the most important front court combinations, like we're talking about Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins? Do you think that that's a realistic thought process? No,
not at all. I mean, just DJ's just not there offensively. He's just not, and he's never going to be that guy to be in that conversation. Yeah, I mean, yeah, in terms of the Lob City, but Blake isn't the same high flyer that he used to be either. So they're more controlled. I think they're better overall players, obviously, than they were 3 to 5 years ago. Nevertheless, this is still, again, they're still going to be a formidable backcourt, but I wouldn't put them up there in the quite of the air of what Cousins and Davis could potentially be if they get their crap together.
All right, now let's go ahead and start making our way down the list of some of these other important free agency transactions that have taken place. This one, Shaw, really a big head scratcher for me. And again, I don't know if this is like Will Dempsey's swan song. Or I don't know if whether or not, Drew Holiday is doing this out of loyalty, or he just recognizes it's about that, it's about that money right now. But he gets a 5-year, $126 million deal. And it's interesting to me, Shaw, because when I look at this, it just doesn't sit right with me. Not that I don't think that Drew isn't deserving of money, but I just don't see where he is going to be a quality player in New Orleans under Alvin Gentry and in that chaotic system and stuff that's happening out there in NOP.
If someone throws that money at you, you have to take it. That's just what it boils down to. That's one of the deals.
Yeah, man, if the Powerball called me up instead of actually doing the whole shooting the balls up the thing and say, hey, Cal, we just want to give you $126 million. Who am I to argue about? Well, no, let me think about this.
Simple as that.
Morality principle and all. I think I'm going to renege. No.
It's as simple as that. And then plus they came correct with the offer, more than correct with the offer. And, everyone knows, the situation that he had with his wife to begin the season. They showed him a lot of respect and loyalty as an organization, and that really kind of bought them some goodwill with him as well too. So he didn't really go out there and make a bunch
$126 million
of calls.
worth of loyalty, Shaw.
Listen, New Orleans is in a situation similar to some of the other teams that we talked about. If not him, then who? Who do they end up having to come and run their offense? They're just not a desirable destination. And although Anthony Davis is a great player, with Boogie there, you just have to be a little bit leery of the recruiting efforts that those two would be able to do and how successful they would be in terms of trying to get somebody else there. So if you have a guy who's willing to stay, you showed him some loyalty. They backed out the Brinks trucks, as we like to say with Isaiah Thomas and such, and they paid him because they didn't think that they were going to be able to be big players in free agency.
I think they tipped over the Brinks trucks with this, Shaw.
No, they did. It's too much. There's no doubt about it. It's too much for
a part-time basketball player. I think that's the part that really irks me.
Yeah, he is always hurt. He's always got something going on.
Right. We just finished, putting together this lineage, like, you know what I'm saying? That about Steph Curry and him paying his dues and doing what was necessary, not complaining. And he has rewarded himself with a 5-year, $200 million deal. Oh, and it's not like he didn't do anything in that span. Now, no disrespect to Drew Holiday, but I feel it's like we're sitting back on the time that when he was an all-star and was unjustifiably traded to the New Orleans Pelicans. But since then, Shaw, we can't even say that Drew Holiday is their starting point guard. Now, the money is probably telling us that, but when you look at the box scores night in and night out, and I understand that part of it has been because of injury. That's another thing that we can throw on top of this. Ultimately, they are throwing out hundreds of millions of dollars to guys that are not even playing starters minutes and have established playing the minimum number of starter games for some of these players. And that to me is where I start to question how you're just throwing the money out. I understand this. If not him, who? But damn, who? Somebody that you know is going to be there night in and night out.
I mean, when Holiday played, he played well. I don't want to take that away from him.
No, I'm not. But I'm just saying he had to be on the court to do that.
Right.
Yeah, and Gentry needed to give him the minutes to do it.
So, I mean, but again, he started the year off with the situation with his wife, as we alluded to. Then it took him a little while to kind of get his win and kind of get going. Then he was playing pretty decently. Then he had to adjust when Cousins got there. And so he had some down games here and there as well, too. So I think, for the most part, after the situation with his wife, he played the majority part of the season. Had maybe a couple of Nixon injuries here and there. And I think they just want to run it back. My thing is not even so much the money. I think it's the amount of years they committed.
Again, that's all that I'm saying. Exactly. To me, Shaw, that's what I'm saying. I'm not talking about just the money. I'm talking about the length in the contract and what you have seen already leading up to that point. Like, it would be different if what we're talking about is in the last year or so, we saw a significant elevated jump in the confidence of saying, I want to give him 5 years. And it to me, I just don't understand. Like, I get it. He's probably not looking for anything less than that. But I don't know whether or not, if you are Will Demps and the rest of the Pelicans management, that you really should be looking at Drew Holiday in such a way that you're saying, oh, well, if Drew walks, somebody else will pick him up. Hey, man, the Minnesota Timberwolves just gave Jeff Teague, a little over $60 million. Right? For 3 years. So I'm just saying, if you don't feel like maybe they clearly feel like Drew Holiday is that guy to give him 5 years. But I don't know if 5 years, $100+ million, because man, if things happen in the first 2 years, now you're stuck with that deal for the next 3, bro. And that to me is the hardest. You can't move guys on those type of deals.
Yeah, well, I think they more or less try to line it up with how long they expect to have AD there. Obviously, they have a big decision to make with Cousins this upcoming summer as well, too. But, like I said, they made a move that they felt was in their best interest to kind of keep that team intact to some degree, to give themselves a chance at a run. We've documented on the show many times how much they've been injured, from AD all the way down to Drew Holiday. And now if they're able to stay healthy, what can this team be? They're going to at least take this year to find out. And I guess they feel maybe it's a movable contract at some point. Holiday does have some equity around the league in terms of being kind of somewhat underrated, although he doesn't play a lot because of all the injuries that he's had. But, like I said, New Orleans was in a difficult situation, so they did the best they could.
All right, you're tuned to The Baseline. Kyle Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Our segment of The Drop, as we give you the FAT report, free agency tracker report. Going over the list of moves that have already happened only a day or two since the free agency period has now commenced. All right, big news out in Toronto, Shaw. Kyle Lowry re-signing with the Raptors on a 3-year, $100 million deal. The Serge Ibaka also re-signing with the Raptors on a 3-year, $65 million deal. Looks like Masai Ujiri is all about keeping this group. This is for however long that he plans to still be with the Toronto Raptors. But how wise of this is a decision on the Kyle Lowry play for 3 years and the Serge Ibaka move for 3 years?
Smart. I mean, again, somewhat shorter deals. Gives them some time to, to build, maybe get some supplemental pieces like they tried to this year. We'll talk about Valanciunas in a little bit, I guess, as well, too. PG Tucker, all that stuff. They've had some holes that they're going to need to fill. But if Norman Paul continues to improve, they can get some other supplemental people to come into this situation, then this is a team that still should be at the top of the Eastern Conference, in that top 4, for a little while longer here. Lawson, with Lowry getting a little bit older, they didn't want to commit the 5 years to him. So 3 seems good. Ibaka, same thing. Lots of conversation about Ibaka's real age. You know how it is with those international guys, and never bring those birth certificates over here. And
hey,
you
man,
know
don't start that birther ish right now, bro. We ain't about that, man. Don't start that birtherism stuff right now, man. We don't need that. Toronto fans don't be needing that right now. I think they just happy that Kyle Lowry is staying with them.
Ibaka could be 42 for all we know, bro.
He plays like he's 52, right? So, listen.
Yeah, but for 3 years, I think this was a good deal for Masai and the Raptors, and it keeps them competitive for the next couple seasons.
All right, so now let's go ahead and focus our attention to a couple of important moves. You brought up actually PJ Tucker because they've got a hole to fill, and that's because PJ Tucker signs a 4-year, $32 million deal with the Houston Rockets. I find this to be an interesting move because while I like PJ Tucker, and I guess it makes sense because he's roughly $8 million a year, right? That it makes sense to do something like that. I tend to wonder though, is his value worth $8 million as much as the market commands what he's getting paid for to do what I think is going to wind up happening while he's out there in Houston?
That's pretty funny. I mean, I think most people think it's a pretty good deal. 8 million nowadays is like, I don't know, 2 or 3 million a couple years ago. So for what he does, and if he can, I figure like you feel like D'Antoni should be able to help him, maybe even be a little bit more efficient and offensively capable within that system. The fact that the Rockets add him and add Chris Paul, 2+ defenders to their roster, and obviously Chris Paul being a plus offensive player, that Rockets team seems to be heading in the right direction. And Tucker's probably not going to start unless somebody gets hurt or whatever the case may be. But now you got Tucker and Ariza and Chris Paul. All those three guys can play defense and lock up some guys here and there too. So I think that's a lineup that you'll see obviously in Capella out there.
Do you think he's going to be a starter over Ryan Anderson?
No. Okay. No, I don't. But I mean, he might. I think there might be some lineups in which he will, and you'll see some adjustments come playoff time as well. But I think Ryan Anderson, for as long as they keep him, because he's rumored to be on the block by Daryl Morey as well. Ryan Anderson will still be out there to kind of help them space the floor and provide some rebounding. But Tucker will get a lot of minutes and probably be the closer for the majority part of their games.
All right, let's go ahead and focus our attention to Utah, because there's still some stuff happening right now out in Utah, like, I don't know, maybe keeping Gordon Hayward, like really trying to keep Gordon Hayward and this Utah Jazz team that found themselves playing in the playoffs. But something to note, which I find to be very intriguing, is the Utah Jazz, their ability to keep Joe Ingles, and they re-signed him to a 4-year, $52 million deal, Shaw. So when I think about what Joe Ingles was able to do for the Utah Jazz and what PJ Tucker did for the Toronto Raptors, now signing on a 4-year, $32 million deal for the Rockets, I think it was $20 million worth to see him juke Blake Griffin and the Los Angeles Clippers in the first round a few times to earn him the money that he's getting. I think it was a pretty good signing by the Utah Jazz, because I think Joe Ingles is a very, very underrated, multi-talented type player at his age.
Yeah, well, I agree in terms of like his use and versatility within that system. I think a lot of that move was done to hopefully retain Gordon Hayward, as they're rumored to be pretty close on that roster as well too. But again, he obviously can play. The Clippers regret letting him go. They had wanted to maybe offer him a deal. I think a couple of other teams had shown some interest as well too. It's a little rich, I think, for Ingles, but hey, there's money to be had, right? So go ahead and make this. Go ahead and make it while you can. Joe Ingles is a quality rotation player, whether he can start or come off the bench. Utah will be able to figure that out once Gordon Hayward makes his decision one way or the other.
Yeah, just weird. As soon as you start talking about that, I started thinking about Different Strokes, the theme music for Different Strokes with Joe Ingles. I don't know why. Maybe he looked like Mr. Drummond. I have no idea. So
whoa and there.
Whoa and there. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and keep it moving with some other important free agency signings. Wow, the Boston Celtics, the Los Angeles Clippers both have to endure taking L's on their starting lineup. J.J. Redick, Amir Johnson now have decided to take 1-year deals with the Philadelphia 76ers. And to me, Shaw, this is important because these are two quality guys that really can help kind of accelerate the process for the process and while they're going through the process of trying to find themselves playing in the playoffs.
Yeah, veteran guys who know what it's like, to go through some playoff battles. Obviously, Redick hasn't had Redick's been to the NBA Finals, right? I think with the Orlando Magic under Van Gundy. So, all of that, like he's a great guy, going to play solid defense for his size, everything of that nature, provides them the shooting and the spacing that they'll need, along with Simmons and Markelle Fultz out there, even gives Embiid some room to operate down low. And Amir, again, a solid dude who's just going to go in there and not hurt you, not too much when he goes on the floor. I'm a little disappointed, though, because there was a rumor from Woj that said that the Celtics were in negotiations to do a sign and trade, which would have probably allowed them to get Okafor for Amir Johnson in that deal. And I think I would take the risk on Okafor, if all it is costing me Amir Johnson, and maybe you can turn him into something. So
yeah.
Unfortunately that didn't work out for Boston. That is what it is. But Philadelphia making great moves for their roster.
Yeah, once again, another angst by Ainge, right? So what more can be said about that? Speaking of Houston, the Houston Rockets and PJ Tucker, I forgot to mention Nene also decides to go on a revised 3-year, $11 million contract, which I think is a pretty decent thing. Keep the core guys that helped you get into the playoffs. Nene, under limited minutes was a solid contributor, and I think he even recognized that on the back end of his career, he can only be on that basketball court for so long, given his knees. But he was definitely a solid 4-5 type of player, added versatility, definitely helped Mike D'Antoni in spot minutes in their half-court game. So I think that was a pretty good and important signing. Let's go ahead and talk about the Golden State Warriors real quick, Shaw. Andre Iguodala, Sean Livingston, both re-upping. And this is important because we'd said Kevin Durant decided not to do anything until he made sure that the rest of the team was taken care of by Lacombe and those guys. And clearly we're seeing that taking place. They are not wasting any time in taking care of Curry. Didn't waste any time with getting back Sean Livingston. And if you're Andre Iguodala, where there was so much rumors, and you were talking about this, Shaw, that there's that possibility that Iggy might be thinking, hey, man, this might be it. Might be start thinking about the money. The Warriors found a way to make it work on a 3-year, $48 million deal, which I think moves very closely to what I think was in the range of what he was looking for, maybe a couple mil here and there. But like I said, man, I think he sees a good thing. I think he wants to be a part of a possible legacy run with this Warriors team.
It just works for him. It really does. I think he maybe used those other teams as leverage. Like, hey, I could leave, but not really ever really wanting to do so. And when you see KD opt out to make sure that they can try to work their money together to figure out what it would take to keep him there. I don't think he was leaving. The same thing that has been said, on multiple reports, that he's got a huge interest in the tech industry. There's nothing better than Silicon Valley and the things that are going out there in that San Francisco area. His post-career stuff is pretty much already set up.
We need to be out there, by the way, so.
Yeah, but his post-career thing is already set up, being in Golden State already. So why leave, especially when you're very much appreciated, and then you can go ahead and get the money that you ended up getting. So Golden State Warriors keep all their lineup together. KD will sign pretty soon. They also re-signed David West too, I think for like a 1-year, $2 million deal or something like that. So pretty much the whole group is coming back, just at varying degrees of finances.
All right, Shaw. And finally, as one of the last points. Now, this hasn't been solidified as to what you had said before we started recording this podcast, but I thought it would be probably be an important thought to bring to the table and for something to keep watching over the next few days. The Sacramento Kings have offered Otto Porter from the Washington Wizards a 4-year, $106 million max contract. Now, why would that be important? Well, Otto Porter Jr. is a restricted free agent. And while the Washington Wizards do have the ability to match, we have seen this play out before on the good and the bad side. Now, why are we talking about this? Because the Washington Wizards has found themselves playing in the semifinal round against the Boston Celtics this past season in the NBA playoffs. And with the combination of Bradley Beal and John Wall, and then you have Otto Porter, you do have a core there. And with the emergence of Scott Brooks now as a great head coach, it makes you wonder, if you commit to this 4-year deal on Otto Porter, are you committing to him being the guy? Now, we've seen Sacramento and teams like the Dallas Mavericks and the Memphis Grizzlies throw out these type of things on these restricted free agents, and they have not been matched. And then we see those players go out there and stink up the joint. Hindsight, the Chandler Parsons syndrome, right? So I'm bringing this to light, y'all, because I do think that this is slightly important. We were sitting there egging Vlade Divac and company about the moves that they didn't make and the moves that they did make. But suddenly over the last couple of months, they've been putting together some very heady little plays right now that could actually suit them well, whether they work or they don't work. And then if you're the Washington Wizards, do you walk away from something like this? Because now you are committing to the idea that Otto Porter is your third guy in this trifecta that you're building.
Yeah, I think, when you say that, will he be the guy? He won't be the guy as long as John Wall and Bradley Beal are there. But it is hard to have, a max player on that roster. That does what Porter does. Yes, he's a capable defender. So, it was worked on his 3-point shot, one of the best 3-point shooters in the season in the league last year. And is a guy who's lengthy and can do a lot of different things from you. Still not a great playmaker, above average rebounder for his size, and it fits in well with those guys. But they were willing to get rid of him if they had a chance at Paul George. So, the fact that they missed out on that leaves them in the situation now where they kind of, same thing, they kind of have to keep him, and it's going to cost them a pretty penny. But kudos to Sacramento. Porter's also going to meet with the Brooklyn Nets, and I'm sure the Nets will offer him the same thing. It's a matter of when he decides to sign, and then the Wizards will have, whatever it is, a couple of days and end up matching that offer, whichever team. And for Sacramento and Brooklyn, I look at it from their standpoint this way. Listen, everybody expects you to be bad, right? So you can throw out this money at these fringe rotation, kind of borderline good players, right?
Is that your
If
word for the
nothing-
week, Shaw? I just want to make sure. Fringe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, fringe.
Fringe.
So if nothing else, like let's say, hey, in the case of Miami Heat last year, they went and matched those offers. Washington now matches these offers. Well, what does it do? It ends up tying up money for those teams, and then allows you to be competitive the next year again for maybe even some better free agents. So Brooklyn and Sacramento and those teams like that, they're like, well, whatever. No one expects us to do anything anyway. So if we get these guys, hey, great, we'll make it work and we'll figure it out. But if not, well, it keeps us competitive, and at least we're drawing up the prices on our competitors. So I think it's a smart play for both those teams. Whether or not you think Porter deserves that much money, obviously that's debatable. But I think those are the situations those teams are choosing.
And again, this is part of the reason why we're bringing this up, because it is something that you do have to think about in the midst of a team that has found themselves now in that conversation of being among the elite teams in the Eastern Conference. And when you look at what has taken place now, Kyle Korver re-signing with the Cleveland Cavaliers. LeBron James and Kyrie Irving is still there. Whether or not Kevin Love's days are numbered, you just start beginning to wonder who all in the Eastern Conference are going to make the nice, small, heady plays, heady moves that's going to maintain and continue to build themselves to at least be in contention to take down, arguably one of the greatest players to ever play the game of basketball in LeBron James and whatever team that he leads. But I will definitely tell you this. If the Washington Wizards don't make a play on this, then it will definitely have us watching them between now and when training camp starts as to how they're going to fill in that void. So there you go.
Yeah, they have a lot to figure out. But I think they're going to match, and they're just going to have to pay that money and figure out how to fill out the bench and some of the other pieces that they need to fill, some of the other holes that they need to fill.
Definitely. All right. Well, there you have it. All of the free agent acquisitions, moves made so far yet. And clearly by the time that we finish putting up this show, there'll be 100 more. So definitely keep us locked, because we love breaking it down and analyzing these moves and how they will impact the teams moving forward. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Drop.
Coast to coast.
Time now to go coast to coast discussing the news in the association. You ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. Let's ride.
All right. New York Knicks, Phil Jackson, part ways. I feel like this was ages ago. It was only like 5 days ago. Carmelo Anthony is impossible. Talks about a buyout for the New York Knicks. What can we make about the craziness that has taken place in the Big Apple?
You only hope the Knicks are finally trending in the right direction. Reports are out there that they are interested in Masai Ujiri from the Toronto Raptors. Of course, they want to make things hard for themselves, not go after a guy who's actually available, like a David Griffin. Griffin is also on the list too, but Masai is kind of unattainable. So Knicks still gonna Knicks, but at least I guess in some ways Phil is out of there, and that could also clear the way for Carmelo to finally be bought out.
Oh man, look, as long as there's still gonna be Steve Mills there, like where's the Knicks? The Knicks will never get where he's like the Ben Carson of the NBA, bro. Like I just don't even understand. Like he's a Dolan crony. It's just unbelievable. Like how these guys operate. It's just the Knicks will never continue. They'll never do anything. So let's just keep it moving. I pray for Carmelo and that he does something more than what's going to happen to him.
That's why this isn't coast to coast, man.
Okay. Derek Favors, Jonas Valanciunas are guys that are mentioned on the aforementioned block, trading block. How good and bad, and who is it that you think probably gets moved faster?
I don't really know. I think Favors potentially, because his deal is pretty palatable, but he's had a lot of injuries, so that is a determining factor, I think, for teams wanting to take that on. But he's a guy who can rebound in interior presence. It just seems like Utah doesn't feel like they need him as much. But those trade rumors might start to die down if Hayward does not sign back with Utah. Valanciunas, again, I think the jury's out. He is what he is. Casey and he don't really seem to get along all that well. So it just seems like a situation that he may not be getting the lion's shares of minutes. He's going to be like Dwight Howard, in these coming years. I think really where he's not going to play a lot in the fourth quarters of games because they just don't trust him out there.
Yeah, man. We'll hopefully these guys will find themselves in destinations where they're better suited and their gameplay can continue to flourish. I feel like Derek Favors has always been moved at a time where you see promise. Jonas, it's taken a long time for that guy to get himself to where he's being respected as a big, but he's been more respected for his thuggery than really for his actual international play. So we'll see how this all plays out, but to your point, it's two interesting pieces definitely on the trading block. Out in Cleveland, LeBron James congratulating on all the deals happening. I knew he threw up that tweet on Steph getting his $200 million and stuff. But he's not really involved in the recruiting process. Now, do you think that LeBron James throwing out that tweet saying congratulations to Steph on making that $200 million was really congratulatory, or a little bit of shade knowing that he was the first $200 million man and not LeBron James?
I think it was congratulatory. I think his comments were just like that there shouldn't be a cap on what players do. Same thing we talked about earlier, how much value Curry's brought to the Warriors. So him being the best player in the NBA, he's like, hey, he wants to be able to make $50 or $60 million a year if it were allowable. So I think that's what it boils down to. The fact that he's not out there recruiting is lending more credence to the notion that this will be his final year in Cleveland. And again, that banana boat team is looking more likely coming for 2018,
and
2019.
That banana boat looked like LeBron James taking that banana ready to stuff it up inside that Range Rover tailpipe of Dan Gilbert, man. That's what that sounds like, you know? Interesting question I want to ask you, Shaw. If LeBron James didn't move and say he did bring a championship to the Cleveland Cavaliers, you think he would have been the first $200 million man in the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, the cap would have allowed him to do so because he signed a 2-year deal instead of the one-on-one that he already has. So I think with like the slight increase that happened this year, that's the problem that a lot of teams are having right now, is that the increase wasn't as much. The cap was projected to be at 108 million. It ended up only being at like 99. So that that difference is pretty big for teams and what they're expecting, and it's also holding up a lot of free agents right now. But I think LeBron, he definitely would have been able to sign a 1-year deal that would have got him probably maybe 38 million or 39 million, something like that.
All right, finally, Shaw, the Orlando Summer League is underway, and you can catch a lot of those games happening on NBA TV. The Utah Summer League and the Vegas Summer League will also be taking place very shortly in the coming weeks. So what can we expect from the Summer League? I know there's been a lot of hype about the 1-3 matchup between the Boston Celtics and the Philadelphia 76ers, draft picks between Jason Tatum and Marcel Fultz. What do you make about this year's Summer League? Is there excitement? Is there hype behind it?
I think there's still some excitement. I feel like it's a little bit dampered because I think free agency is so hot this year, but and the prospects, although very good, pretty much across the board for the most part, I just don't think there's the same buzz that there typically is, at least not for me. But nevertheless, we'll definitely tune in, keep track of all the action that's going on out there, and kind of see what these players are looking like. And I think you may even come into fruition that so maybe even some of these guys are going to be discussed, in trade rumors and things of that nature, depending on how they look in summer league and things like that too. So much to watch and much to discuss over the next coming weeks.
What I would probably like to see though, Shaw, now that we're sort of seeing this expanse of the summer leagues, that you have one in Orlando, you have one in Utah, you have one in Vegas. It would be kind of nice to probably see one maybe in the Northeast, and you basically have these summer league teams play, and then I don't know, maybe figure out to have like some kind of final tournament or type thing where you get the final teams, the winners of the respective summer leagues, to come out and you play each other for for like a little title thing. I think that would be pretty cool.
I'm not knocking it. Just the business model is a little difficult with 3 summer leagues. Some of those teams compete in 2 of those 3. I don't think anybody competes in all 3 of them. You're funding a roster of X amount of players for, and guys coming in and out, the coaching, the travel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's probably like the hindrance of maybe something like that happening, but it would be nice to see. I'm looking to have like down here in my South Florida area, some sort of summer run, like how they have Drew League and things of that nature. Like you have Rucker up there, South Florida doesn't have anything. I'd love to have, some sort of, semi-pro-am league down here in the South Florida in the summer too. But hey, we got the big 3, right?
No, I mean, of course, you got a big 3 and you got a couple of banana boats, down there.
And the Champions League, some stuff happening. So I guess I won't complain too much.
A little something. All right, well, nevertheless. Awesome show this week, Shaw. So much that we went over, so much to discuss. The trades with Paul George, Chris Paul, Jimmy Butler. And we even threw a little Ricky Rubio in there. Who knew? And then the NBA free agency acquisitions, man, just absolutely phenomenal. The moment that bell hits, it's almost like kind of like your iPhone alarm going off. Like the moment that clock strikes 12, like just the craziness just starts happening, and it's just an absolute frenzy of money being thrown all over the damn place. I mean, I can only wish that one day that we will be in the middle of this and stuff, and just watch the checks just flying off the desk and out to wherever destination, to whichever player it is that winds up being, man. But just to be able to report on it, I think is pretty awesome. And it's definitely changing the landscape about how some of these teams are being built for the 2017-2018 season.
Yeah, with the cap being shorter, as I said a little bit earlier, and then how people just reacted and went crazy last year, a la Timothy Mozgov and Luol Deng getting those big contracts. Some players now are a little upset that they're not getting those same deals because the money just isn't even there like that, like how they thought it would be. So we'll see if there's a bigger spike next year and see what fruit that lends to bear, if you will. But as always, it's just great, to see how much excitement it is around NBA free agency. It's just, again, it seems to be providing a little bit more excitement than the playoffs did. And although that might be a little bit sad for some, we're going to be there regardless, man. So as always, it's a pleasure to cover this news with you, and can't wait to see what the next coming weeks bring. We may have to bust out an emergency podcast if we get the Gordon Hayward thing, with the next coming days on 4th of July or something like that. So we'll stay tuned as always, my dude.
Yeah, Paul George. Funny how Paul George might be the one setting off fireworks for 2017 and not the up here in New Jersey, since we have a government shutdown. We may not be able to see any kind of fireworks from our respective parks. So I'm calling on Paul George. Make it happen, baby. We need fireworks. We need fireworks up here in New Jersey.
Yeah, you got D'Angelo Russell.
we got well, Brooklyn's got D'Angelo Russell. Jersey ain't got D'Angelo Russell.
Yeah, sorry about that.
The Warriors might have Swaggy P. Go figure, right? So, it's all good now.
It's all over the place.
All over the place. Awesome show. Once again, we appreciate you and yours for tuning in to our podcast. Once again, be sure to catch us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Microsoft TuneIn, Player FM, iHeartRadio, on all the major platforms. Big shout outs to those who continue to show love and support. We definitely encourage you to give us a shout out, throw your comments, get on the Twitter, let us know what you think, how you feel. We always love bringing you guys on board, and definitely appreciate the love and support. For the Baseline, Cali, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. Have an awesome 4th of July holiday, and we will catch up with you next time.